Hey there. Tonight, we'll take a quiet walk through the life of someone who never got to choose where the path led. A medieval prince. Not yet a king, not quite a boy, and never truly free. Surrounded by stone, silks, and silence, his world was shaped long before he was born. His future decided. His every breath watched. No bruises, no chains, just rules, rituals, and the cold weight of duty pressing down like winter air in a windowless room. So dim the lights, make yourself comfortable, and let's begin this quiet descent into the life of a prince in the Middle Ages. He wakes before the light comes, in a room built of stone and ritual. The walls are thick, not for warmth, but for permanence. They keep out sound, keep in breath. The air doesn't move here, not even when the windows are opened to the frost. The mattress beneath him is soft enough, though not by choice. It is prescribed softness, measured, inherited. The sheets are clean but cool to the touch, pressed tight like discipline. Above him, the ceiling arches high, timbered like a chapel, and though he sees it every morning, it never greets him. No voice stirs him. No mother's hand or gentle sunbeam dares interrupt the silence. He opens his eyes alone. A servant waits nearby, already standing, already bowed, already watching. The prince does not rise. He is raised. His feet are guided into slippers, his shoulders dressed while he stares at nothing. The cold doesn't sting anymore. It has lived with him long enough to become background. The room is not small, but it is not his. Everything within it has been chosen for him. Tapestries of ancestors, a polished desk that holds no secrets, a fireplace that burns on schedule. Even the robe he wears has been set out in advance, its fabric heavy with meaning and lined with a color he did not pick. He does not ask where the firewood came from, nor who stitched his crest into the collar. Those questions are beneath him, and so they remain unanswered. The floor is stone, cold through the soles of his shoes. He never touches it barefoot. That would be unseemly. He crosses the room not freely, but along a path that has been walked 1,000 times by those who came before him. His ancestors stare down from their frames with the same pale eyes, the same pinched mouths. They do not smile. They do not forgive. He is not meant to feel at home among them, only in place. Outside the walls of his chamber, life stirs in predictable patterns. Servants move in silence in setting down warm water, placing folded linen just so. No one speaks unless spoken to. The prince does not speak. He nods once and the motions continue. There is no conversation to soften the morning, no voice to distract him from the echo of his own footsteps. Even his body resists expression. His face must remain composed, his movements measured. He has been taught this since the age of reason, whenever that was. Emotions belong to children and commoners. He is expected to carry the weight of his future on a back that has never bent in labor. The silence is not peaceful, it is performative. It is the absence of freedom, draped in velvet. He eats nothing yet. First comes prayer, then instruction, then perhaps a small bowl of something bland and warm, to remind him he is still human. As the light begins to creep across the windows, filtered by stained glass and geometry, it reveals little warmth. The day will be full, as it always is. Lessons in governance and family history, in the way of courtly speech. Exercises with blade and saddle, etiquette for tables he does not enjoy. And yet, in this moment, he lingers in the quiet, because it is the only time when no one expects anything. He does not long for joy. Joy is foreign. He does not long for change. Change is dangerous. He only breathes in the cold and listens to his own breath, slow and hollow, like the draft that slips beneath the door, despite the velvet curtain drawn across it. He does not shiver. He has learned not to. The prince begins his day not with purpose, not with hope, but with stillness. Because that, at least, is allowed. The garments arrive before he finishes dressing, laid out in layers by invisible hands. Each piece has a name, a function, and a purpose that is older than his memory. The undergarments must be linen, thin and tight, wrapped around the skin like a second thought. Over them, wool for warmth and silence. Then the tunic, embroidered not for beauty, but for symbolism, displaying colors chosen by men who ruled before him and will be spoken of long after he is dust. Gold thread outlines the edge of the crest. He is told not to fidget with it. The weight of the belt is surprising every time, not because it is heavy, but because it reminds him that nothing he wears is meant to comfort. It is meant to display lineage. It is meant to hold posture in place. The cloth does not move with him, it resists him. The sleeves are stiff. The boots are unforgiving. Nothing fits as it should, because none of it was made for who he is, only for what he represents. Every button fastened by someone else, every fold pressed by hands he does not see. He stands still as it happens, arms outstretched like a statue being dressed for display. The formality of the ritual is not questioned, it simply is. A prince is not meant to dress himself. He is an object in the morning routine of the castle, a fixed point around which others orbit. The collar is high and close, cutting into the skin when he turns his head too quickly. The brooch at his throat is cold at first, then warm, then forgotten, until it scratches, until it catches. The cloak is last, thick with dyed velvet, trimmed with fur that still smells faintly of the animal it came from. He is too young to feel power in it, and too old to be amused. He simply lets it settle on his shoulders like all the other expectations that press down but never speak. When he finally moves, it is not freely, it is cautiously, with steps measured to avoid creasing, catching, or dragging. The clothes do not allow clumsiness. They do not forgive missteps. He is led to stand before a mirror not for vanity, but for confirmation. The image that greets him is not a boy. It is a figure constructed by protocol and embroidery. The folds of the fabric fall just so, the hair combed to expose his brow, the boots polished by someone he never thanks. He stares at himself and sees not pride, not even recognition, but burden. He knows which garment is for court, which is for chapel, which is for foreign visitors who speak languages he is not yet allowed to learn. He knows that on feast days he will wear heavier cloth, with chains that cut into his collarbone. He knows that summer brings no relief, only sweating beneath silk, unable to wipe his brow in front of others. He knows that nothing he wears is his choice. Not today, not tomorrow, not on the day he is crowned, if crowned. That too remains a silent question, tucked beneath the fabric, folded with care. There are times when he remembers softer cloth, childhood garments, simpler colors, sleeves that could be rolled up without offense. But those days are gone, replaced by stitched symbolism and fabrics that dictate how close he can sit to a fire. He cannot run in these clothes. He cannot kneel without assistance. Even breathing feels staged, pulled against a tunic that does not stretch. The layers between his skin and the world are thick, but they do not protect. They expose. They say, "Here is someone important, someone watched." And so he carries himself the way the garments demand, upright, measured, removed. He does not itch, even when he does. He does not complain, even when the wool scratches raw, because the garments are not his to question. They are part of him now, as much as his name, his lineage, his silence. The clothes wear him, and he, in turn, disappears beneath them. The first lesson begins before the sun has the courage to rise. The candle is already lit when he enters the chamber, its flame flickering against the damp stone like a silent metronome for the rhythm of knowledge. The tutor waits, never seated, never late. His face is as gray as the room itself, his tone flatter than the worn pages he carries. There is no greeting, only the soft sound of the prince's footsteps as he takes his place on the hard bench, spine straight, hands folded, eyes forward. The cold is sharp, more so because it is not acknowledged. He is not asked if he is warm enough, if he slept well, if he is ready. Readiness is assumed. Comfort is irrelevant. The book is opened, and the Latin begins. Recitation by memory. Translation without hesitation. Words that died centuries ago now live again in his mouth, not because he understands them, but because he must. Mistakes are not punished with violence, but with disappointment. A pause, a correction, a silence more biting than rebuke. The tutor's voice does not rise, but its weight deepens when the prince falters. He is expected to know scripture, lineage, treaties, the shape of the world drawn by hands that have never touched its edges. There is no time for questions, only answers. He recites the names of emperors long buried, the outcomes of wars he did not witness, the catechisms of a faith chosen on his behalf. Occasionally, he is asked for interpretation, but not from himself, from tradition. What would a proper prince say here? What would his father expect? What would please the bishop? There is no curiosity in these questions, only rehearsals for conversations he will one day have, if he lives long enough to have them. The words are tools, and he is being sharpened like one. Over and over, until the dullness is gone. When Latin ends, history begins. Not the kind filled with adventure or discovery, but the kind that sits heavy in ledgers and titles. He memorizes inheritance lines, treaties, betrayals, and the subtle differences between kinds of vassals. Everything has consequence. Every error could someday cause insult or war. And so he memorizes without affection. There is no awe in these stories, only obligation. Dates fall into his mind like stones into a sack. They weigh him down, but no one offers to carry the load. Even when his eyes blur, when the numbers twist on the page, he continues. To stop would be noticed. To slow would be marked. There are no pauses. Not for the cough. Not for the yawn that almost escapes. Not for the ache that settles in his shoulders. The tutor stands, unmoved. The world outside may still be dark, but in this room time marches forward with relentless precision. Eventually, they arrive at etiquette, the art of being noble without warmth. He learns the correct incline of the head, the placement of cutlery, the phrasing of compliments he does not feel. He practices smiles in the mirror, not to express, but to conceal. A prince must speak with elegance, even when furious. He must sit with grace, even when exhausted. He must know when to laugh and how much, depending on the rank of the speaker. These things are not instinct. They are drilled again and again until even his gestures are not his own. All of this happens before the castle fully wakes, before the kitchen fires are roaring, before the courtyards echo with hooves and shouting. He has already filled his mind with the expectations of centuries before him. Most servants have rubbed sleep from their eyes. There is no praise, only the turning of the page, the next word to memorize, the next role to rehearse. The sun may rise, but his day had already begun in darkness, lit only by duty. The table is long and polished, set precisely the same each morning, as if ritual alone could summon meaning. He does not sit at the head, not yet, but he is given his place, measured, prepared, immovable. The meal is already there when he arrives, laid out in quiet ceremony by hands that withdraw before his gaze can meet theirs. The bread is cut, not torn. The porridge is warm, not hot. The plate is filled just enough to suggest care, but never indulgence. There is no aroma that stirs the appetite, no color that delights the eye. Everything is muted, beige, gray, soft browns, and so is the silence. No one speaks, not the servants who stand nearby, nor the priest who blesses the food, nor the prince himself. To speak without invitation would be improper. To ask for more would be worse. The food is not for pleasure. It is for function. It is what the body requires, nothing more. The rules are unspoken but rigid. He must eat slowly, but not lazily. He must chew modestly, drink without slurping, and always keep his eyes down unless addressed. The spoon must return to the bowl without clatter. The cup must be lifted with the correct hand, held with 3 fingers, no more, no less. Every movement is noted, even if not corrected aloud. The meal becomes a performance, and like all performances, it drains more than it gives. Hunger is not acknowledged. Fullness is not expected. There are days when the fasts last longer, and he learns to sit through the ache in his stomach with the same blank face he uses during diplomacy lessons. During Lent, the table shrinks even further. Broths, salted fish, dried fruits too sour to enjoy. He says grace before and after, not as prayer, but as punctuation. His words are memorized, his gestures practiced. The food may nourish, but it does not comfort. There are no favorites, no second helpings. The kitchens may prepare lavish meals for the visiting nobles or for court banquets, but the prince's plate remains carefully regulated. Even on feast days, his portion is symbolic. He must sample, not feast. He is watched not only for what he eats, but how he eats it. A future king must show temperance, even with roasted meats steaming inches from his mouth. There are times when the smell of the hall, of butter, of cloves, of roasted bones, lingers longer than the meal itself. He has tasted delicacies he will never enjoy. He has chewed slowly through dishes meant to impress, not satisfy. Even sweet things, when they appear, are offered with warning glances. Too much indulgence dulls the spirit. He has heard stories of fat princes laughed at in court. His tutors have made sure he will not be one of them. He learns to leave food on the plate, not because he is full, but because it is expected. When the meal ends, it ends completely. There is no lingering, no conversation, no dessert in the modern sense. A cloth is offered, hands wiped, mouth dabbed, and then he stands. He does not speak to the servants. He does not ask what will be prepared later. He does not enter the kitchens or smell the fire where stew simmers in iron pots. That world is closed to him. Food, for the prince, is not a place of joy or exploration. It is a mirror of his role, measured, managed, and emptied without question. He walks away without remembering the taste. Only the texture remains, a faint memory in his throat, a ghost of warmth in his stomach. The nourishment is real, but the pleasure is missing. Like so much of his day, it is not lived, it is endured. There are hours in the day marked for what some would call leisure, but even then, there is no real room for play. The word itself feels foreign inside the stone walls of his life, as though it belongs to another class, another world. He is allowed recreation, but that too is bound in ritual. His outings are arranged, not spontaneous. The grounds are cleared in advance. If he is to ride, the horse is chosen for him. If he is to walk, it must be in the presence of someone who can recite the virtues of the ruling class as they stroll. Every movement is observed, every deviation corrected. There is no chase through wet grass, no tumbling in leaves, no climbing trees with bark-stained hands. The idea of running just to run is almost laughable. He is dressed too finely, watched too closely, expected to carry himself as though the crown already sits on his brow. Joy, if it happens, must come quietly and in acceptable shapes. Even toys are not truly his. A carved wooden knight, a chessboard of ivory and onyx, a book of beasts illuminated in gold. These are objects meant to refine, not entertain. He holds them with care, not because he treasures them, but because someone might be watching. When a game is played, it is with older boys of equal birth, and it is not about fun. It is about control, composure, and showing the traits of leadership. He must not win too easily, nor lose too visibly. He must not gloat, and he must never sulk. A single sigh, a raised voice, a look of frustration. These are marks of weakness that will be remembered. So he learns to master himself in games designed not for laughter, but for display. Every contest, every board, every ball thrown and caught is a lesson in posture. Not a single scrape on the knee is tolerated. Bruises are evidence of recklessness, and recklessness is unforgivable. When he hears the laughter of stable boys or the chase of dogs after one another, it does not draw him in. It reminds him of distance. There are walls between them, not just of stone but of expectation. He does not wrestle in the dirt. He does not sneak sweets or play tricks. Even mischief is too dangerous a luxury. If he breaks something, there will be questions. If he falls, there will be whispers. And if he is caught smiling too freely, someone will ask if he's forgotten his place. The idea of freedom is wrapped in velvet and nailed to the ground. He is not bored exactly. He is occupied at all hours, but none of it fills him. Time passes, but it does not play. It walks beside him like a servant with a ledger, counting minutes spent in noble silence. Every attempt at fun is either molded into formalities or removed altogether. In the evenings, he sometimes watches younger children from behind a high window. Their games are simple, chasing each other through courtyards, pretending to be knights, shouting and tripping, and laughing without correction. No one writes down their mistakes. No one warns them to behave like heirs. He watches not with envy, but with a quiet resignation. That path is not his, was never his, Even his memories of laughter are tinged with instruction. Smile for the ambassador. Laugh only when your father does. Do not giggle. Do not shout. His world is quiet, composed, and lined with gold that never warms. Even the jester's antics are not for his delight. They serve a role. They fill the silence at court and make the king appear more generous. The prince is expected to laugh only if others do, and only in measure. So he learns early that childhood is not something he will experience, only something he must imitate on command, in the proper setting, dressed in velvet and silence. He enters the study chamber not with anticipation, but with the quiet reflex of someone trained to expect correction. The tutor is already there, as always, seated rigidly behind a desk that holds more parchment than kindness. His robes are dark, pressed, expressionless. His eyes never leave the page before him until the prince is in position. Back straight, hands visible, voice ready. There is no greeting, not because it would be improper, but because it is unnecessary. Their arrangement does not require warmth. It requires results. The tutor does not speak until silence has fully settled. Then come the instructions. Short, precise, never repeated. The tone is dry. The rhythm slow but unrelenting. When the boy responds, he is interrupted for hesitation, corrected for intonation, guided with a frown that cuts more sharply than any lash could. The tutor never raises his voice. He doesn't need to. Authority lives in the space between his words. And in that space, the prince learns to fear stillness. Every subject has its own method of punishment. For poor Latin, the text must be rewritten by candlelight. For incorrect theology, there are recitations so long his throat burns. For missteps in etiquette, posture drills that leave his back aching by nightfall. But perhaps worse than these are the lessons without end, when no response is enough, no sentence complete, and the silence from the other side of the desk stretches into something unbearable. The tutor never strikes. His disapproval is colder than that. It arrives in glances, in the slow setting down of a quill, in the pause before an assignment is replaced with a more difficult one. The boy has never heard the man laugh. He doubts he could. If the prince achieves something remarkable, the reward is silence. No praise, no nod, no moment of shared pride. Only the turning of a page and a reminder that this too must be memorized, that nothing is ever truly finished. He does not know where the tutor sleeps. He has never seen him eat. The man seems to exist only in this room, emerging each morning as if summoned by duty itself. Some days the boy wonders if he was ever a child, if he ever knew sunlight not filtered through stone, if he ever ran, ever played, ever felt something he wasn't required to recite. But those questions go unspoken. The tutor discourages curiosity, not directly, but through omission. When the boy once asked about a passage in a text, something not on the lesson plan, the tutor simply looked at him, not with anger, but with absence, as if he had asked about weather in a world where rain no longer fell. From that day on, the boy learned not to ask. The boundaries of knowledge were not to be expanded, only obeyed. He is being molded, not inspired, formed into a shape that fits the throne, even if it bruises him along the way. And yet, the tutor is always there, unchanging, predictable. In a world where affection is measured and trust is a luxury, The boy begins to depend on that steadiness. Not love, he would not call it that, but presence. The tutor will never offer comfort. He will never smile at a clever answer or chuckle at a small mistake. But he will not abandon his post. He will be there every morning with ink on his fingers and disappointment in his posture. And for a prince who is watched by courtiers, weighed by relatives, and whispered about by servants, that consistency becomes its own strange comfort. It is not warmth, but it is real. The tutor teaches more than knowledge. He teaches endurance. The boy learns to sit longer, speak more carefully, fail without flinching. And in the tutor's cold, unwavering gaze, he begins to understand what is expected of him, not as a student, but as a ruler. Not to be loved, but to be followed, to be feared, to be alone. He walks without wandering. Each step he takes is known before it lands. The corridor is empty of sound, but full of presence. Eyes in the shadowed corners, eyes behind open doors, eyes pretending to look away. The guards stand still, but their heads turn slightly as he passes. The servants pause mid-task, lowering their gaze just enough to seem respectful, but not so much as to miss his expression. Even the tapestries seem to lean in slightly, as if the woven knights and saints have been told to keep watch. The prince does not drag his feet, does not skip, does not pause to peer through the stained glass windows. His walk is not his own. It is a procession, rehearsed without rehearsal, expected without explanation. The stone beneath his shoes is worn smooth, not by his steps alone, but by centuries of men who walked like this before him, straight-backed, forward-looking, always watched. He cannot go anywhere alone, not truly. Even when dismissed from his lessons, even when allowed a short walk in the garden, someone follows. Sometimes it's the steward, with a hand behind his back and a question always forming. Sometimes a chaplain, ready to remind him of virtue and vigilance. Often it is a guard, silent, present, armor quiet, but unmistakable. If he turns, the man is there. If he lingers, the man waits. If he strays from the permitted path, the man clears his throat, softly but pointedly. The message is clear. You are not lost, and you are not free. Every door he passes has ears behind it. Every hall reflects his posture back at him. He begins to imagine the castle itself is alive, measuring him. Not to protect, but to shape. He is never where he is by accident. His routes are planned. His presence is anticipated. His absence, should it ever occur, would be cause for alarm. The worst is not the surveillance itself, but what it takes from him. He does not run because running draws comment. He does not kneel because kneeling looks desperate. He does not stop to look up at the ceiling, even if the arches are beautiful. Every gesture carries weight. If he sighs too loudly, someone may ask what troubles him. If he smiles too easily, someone may assume he's being foolish. And if he says nothing at all, they'll fill the silence with assumptions. So he walks like a statue in motion, measured, careful, not too fast, not too slow. He has been told he walks well, though never praised for it. His gait, like everything else, has been observed, corrected, and codified. His body, once his own, now belongs to the eyes around him. It must not betray tiredness. It must not itch or slouch or fidget. He walks with grace, not because it comes naturally, but because he has been taught what gracelessness costs. Even in the gardens, where the hedges bloom and the air is almost sweet. He does not walk alone. A shadow trails him, just far enough not to intrude, just close enough to intervene. He pretends not to notice, but he always knows. The prince cannot disappear, not even for a moment. If he were to turn down a path unscheduled, someone would follow. If he sat on a bench too long, someone would ask if he was ill. Privacy is not a privilege he will ever know. Solitude is not a gift he can request. And so he walks as he lives, in view, in form, in expectation. His footsteps echo not for lack of sound, but because there is nothing private for them to land upon. Every movement is remembered by someone, and even when he is finally allowed to rest, even when the corridors dim and the castle sleeps, he carries the sensation with him that someone is still watching, not out of care, but out of duty. The sword is placed in his hands before his fingers are ready to hold it. It gleams, but not with promise, only with expectation. Polished steel, balanced, heavy at the hilt, and heavier in meaning. It is not a toy, though at times it feels like a prop. He lifts it with both hands, as taught, adjusting his grip to avoid the raw edge of pain that forms where skin meets wood and leather. The master-at-arms watches with arms crossed, saying nothing at first. Then the orders begin. Raise, step, pivot, block, again. The rhythm is relentless. No flourish, no fantasy, no glory. Just repetition, sweat, and the slow awareness that this is not about becoming strong. It's about learning to endure. The prince moves forward, backward, circles again, and still the weight presses down. Not just the sword itself, but the knowledge that he must not falter, not flinch, not fall. The blows come slowly at first, controlled and deliberate. Each strike from the instructor lands against wood or shield, never skin. Yet even the near misses bruise. His arms ache, his shoulders burn, his wrists tremble beneath the effort of holding form. There are rules to every motion, where the feet must land, where the eyes must look, how the breath must be drawn. It is a choreography of strain. He stumbles once and the sword clatters against the stone floor. A silence follows, heavier than rebuke. He retrieves it quickly, shame flooding his cheeks, but no one offers comfort, only correction. Again. This time with firmer grip, this time without letting go. Each mistake is not just a failure. It is a sign that he is not ready, not worthy, and readiness is not optional. He may never swing a sword in battle, but he must always appear as though he could. He learns to hide the pain. The bruises beneath his sleeves are not shown, not spoken of. The blisters that open and harden and open again are part of the lesson. No one asks if he's tired. No one suggests a pause. The ground is hard, the air is dry, and the sun does not pity him. The prince does not sweat openly. He learns to keep his breathing even, to blink away the sting, to nod without revealing the dull throb in his bones. At night, the aches settle into him like a second skin. He does not complain. If he does, he will be asked whether a king should whimper, whether an army will wait while he recovers. And so he bears it in silence. Strength is not measured in power, but in restraint. He begins to understand that the sword is not there to make him feel capable. It is there to remind him that nothing comes without cost. Over time, he memorizes the forms. His feet know the distance. His wrists learn when to tense, but the sword never becomes light. It remains what it is, cold, indifferent, unyielding. He does not love it. He respects it, the way one respects a storm or a wall. He dreams of battles, but only the ones described in lessons. Clinical, strategic, free from screams. He will never be a soldier. He will never charge into a melee. But he must look as though he might. That image must be preserved for the sake of morale, of lineage, of legend. When visitors come, he may be asked to demonstrate. He will grip the sword, perform the motions, strike the target, and return to stillness. They will nod. He will bow. And they will never know how heavy it really is. Not just in weight, but in what it denies. The sword is not a path to freedom. It is another shape of the cage. The chapel is cold in the morning, colder than the corridors, colder than the stones beneath his bed. The light filters in through high, narrow windows, casting pale beams across the stone floor, where dust hangs like a secret. The air smells of wax and age, of incense burned too often and never for him. The prince enters without hesitation, not because he feels called, but because it is scheduled. His place is marked, his posture expected, his voice measured before a word is spoken. The priest does not greet him. Instead, the old man nods, opens the book, and begins. The prince joins in with practiced cadence. His tone is flat, not from defiance, but from habit. Every word has been memorized, every pause timed. There is no room for thought, only correctness. The prayers are not for guidance. They are not for comfort. They are for obedience. And he obeys. He has been taught that a prince must be pious, not devout. There is a difference. Devotion lives in the heart. Piety lives in the eyes of others. He is watched as he kneels, as he crosses himself, as he murmurs the responses. His hands must fold properly. His gaze must remain fixed. No fidgeting, no yawning, no signs of disinterest. The soul, he has been told, is not visible. But behavior is, and behavior is what will be judged. The prayers themselves are long, full of repetition, of names and saints and promises made on his behalf before he was born. He recites them all. He does not know if he believes what he says. That question is not welcomed. Faith, in his world, is not examined. It is recited. It is a pillar, not a door. And so he speaks the words without questioning them, the way he wears the crest on his tunic, because it is part of who he is told to be. Even outside the chapel, faith follows. At meals, there are blessings. In lessons, scripture is quoted. In public, he must bow his head when a priest passes, kiss the ring when one extends it, stand during sermons even when his legs ache. There are holy days, fasts, rituals that must be kept. Each one is a test not of his belief, but of his discipline. The bishop visits often, and when he does, the prince must be ready with a psalm, a prayer, a question that sounds thoughtful but not irreverent. Religion wraps around him like another layer of clothing, tight, ornate, and not his own. He is never alone with it. Even his private prayers are rehearsed. At night, before bed, he repeats the same lines, taught to him when he was too young to know what they meant. He says them still, not from fear, not from love, but because silence feels wrong without them. They are the rhythm of his confinement. There are moments, rare and brief, when he wonders what it would be like to pray and feel something. Not duty, not pressure, not the expectation of being watched, but something real. He has seen old women in the village clasp their hands with tears in their eyes. He has heard monks chant in the early morning, not for show, but because something in them needed to. He envies that, quietly, but he does not speak of it. It would sound foolish, childish even. A prince does not seek faith, he performs it. And so he continues, day after day, voice steady, knees bent, eyes forward. Every prayer is learned by heart, and slowly that heart becomes quiet. Not from peace, but from absence. The words fill the silence, and the silence becomes enough. The puppy was given to him on his name day, a small creature with oversized paws and ears that never stayed upright. It yawned and stumbled and licked his fingers with clumsy affection. For a brief moment, something like joy flickered in his chest. Not because of the gift, but because the dog looked at him without expectation. It did not bow. It did not recite. It simply was. He named it, though the name was later corrected by a steward to something more dignified. He tried to keep it in his chambers, but the servants disapproved. Too much fur on the rugs, too much noise in the morning. Eventually, the dog was moved to the kennels. A handler was assigned. The prince was told he could visit whenever he liked, and he did, at first. But each time he arrived, the puppy seemed less his. It obeyed the handler's voice. It responded to the handler's whistle. It ran in circles when the man approached, and only trotted to the prince with hesitance, as if uncertain of its role. The prince did not ask why. He already knew. Later came the falcon, sleek and sharp-eyed, perched on a leather glove that didn't quite fit his hand. The bird was trained, already accustomed to commands, and when it took flight, it did so not for freedom, but because it had been taught that return meant reward. The prince watched it circle, watched it dive, and for a moment felt the thrill of motion, of control, but the falconer stood beside him at all times, whispering instructions, adjusting the strap, guiding his grip. If the bird faltered, it was not the prince's failure. If the bird excelled, it was not his success. He was allowed to feed it, but only under supervision. He was allowed to hold it, but only when told. The falcon did not know him. It knew the glove. And when it slept, it did so in a mews outside the castle walls, far from the boy who called it his. He stopped asking for it after a while, not out of anger, but out of understanding. It was never really his to begin with. The horses were different, larger, louder, less easily claimed. They stood tall in their stalls, their breath steaming in the cold air of the stables, their eyes watching every movement with slow intelligence. The prince was assigned a particular mare, steady, well-trained, already broken in. He learned to mount her, to ride at a walk, to guide her through the courtyard with care. But the stable master always hovered nearby, correcting his posture, adjusting the reins, issuing instructions as though the horse were a blade and the prince a careless hand. He was not allowed to groom her. That was the work of others. He was not allowed to feed her outside of prescribed hours. That would ruin her regimen. When she became sick one winter, he was not informed until after she had recovered. And when she was eventually replaced, no one asked him if he minded. The new horse had a different stride, a different smell, a different name. He rode her just the same. Over time, he stopped thinking of them as his. The animals came and went, gifts from foreign courts, trophies from hunts he did not attend, companions in title only. He learned to smile when they were presented to him. He learned to accept them without expectation, because affection was dangerous. It made you visible. It made you vulnerable. If he cared too much, someone would notice. And if they noticed, they could take it away. Not cruelly, not directly, but in small, official ways. A new handler, a change in schedule, a quiet decision made in another room. So he kept his distance. He stroked their heads when told, offered treats with a gloved hand, watched their movements with polite interest. But he did not name them. He did not dream of them. He did not imagine them waiting for him. They were beautiful, noble, and unreachable, like so much else in his life. Not his, never his. He is not supposed to get sick. His bloodline is meant to be strong. His body, the future vessel of a throne, should resist fevers, chills, and weakness. And when it doesn't, no one says it out loud. The first sign is usually silence. A servant notices he didn't finish his meal. A tutor remarks on his slower responses. A guard comments that he seems pale. No one says ill. Not at first. The word is dangerous. Illness in a prince is not simply a condition. It is a failing, a threat to perception, a crack in the image that others work so carefully to maintain. When the signs can no longer be ignored, a physician is summoned. Quietly, often in the night, through back halls. He arrives with tools that smell of vinegar and hands that do not comfort. The diagnosis is not shared with the prince, only with his keepers. He is told to rest, but not too long. To recover, but quickly. His duties are reduced, but never removed. The treatments come without ceremony. A draft forced down while he lies still. A compress pressed too hard against his skin. A bleeding, if deemed necessary, done with hands that do not hesitate and words that do not soothe. Pain is part of the process, and he is expected to endure it in silence. He does, even when it burns, even when it stings, even when his muscles tighten from cold or his stomach twists with nausea. He bites the inside of his cheek rather than cry out. To complain is to invite shame. He has heard the whispers. A strong prince does not whimper. A future king does not retreat beneath blankets. So he keeps his face blank, even when the sweat runs down it. He learns to sit upright when others enter the room, to hide the shiver in his hands, to speak with a steady voice even when his breath is shallow. The worst is not the sickness itself, but the fear of being seen as weak. Recovery is measured not in health, but in appearance. As soon as he can stand, he is expected to return to the lessons, to the chapel, to the table. Even if the fever lingers, even if food turns to ash in his mouth, there are no second chances at reputation. If a visiting noble sees him limp, it becomes a rumor. If a bishop sees him yawn, it becomes a question. And so he rehearses health, the way he rehearses posture and speech. He sits without leaning. He speaks without rasp. He walks a little slower, but never stumbles. And no one comments, because that would make the weakness real. The court has no room for convalescence. He must recover behind a mask, one he wears more tightly than any robe. There are times when he wonders if they would rather he died of strength than lived with fragility. But he does not ask. Questions, like symptoms, are best left unspoken. In the rare quiet after the fever breaks, when he lies alone in the dim light and the world is still, he feels the weight of it all. The way his body does not belong to him. The way his suffering must remain invisible. He thinks of the other boys, those in the village who get to stay in bed and be cared for, who are allowed to cry, to sleep, to be children. But he is not like them. He is not allowed to feel sorry for himself. He is told that kings do not need pity, that legacy is not forged in comfort. And so he lies still, staring at the rafters, feeling the ache in his bones and the hollowness in his chest, and says nothing. No prayers, no curses, just breath, just the knowledge that this too must pass, quietly, like a shadow across stone. Because in his world, sickness is not just pain, it is failure, and failure cannot be seen. The dining hall is long and echoing, with ceilings that swallow voices and walls lined with faces painted centuries ago. Candles flicker along the table, not for warmth, but for ceremony. The prince enters with quiet steps, already dressed in what has been deemed suitable, already rehearsed in posture and restraint. His seat is assigned, not at the head, not quite in the center, but in a place that allows him to be seen and watched. Around him sit men older than him, men who speak in low tones when they speak at all, counselors, clergymen, foreign dignitaries. Some nod in his direction. Few ever speak directly to him. He is not here to talk. He is here to be seen dining well. The utensils are polished, the bread cut with unnatural symmetry. His cup is filled before he touches it, and the food arrives in courses that match the tempo of the evening rather than the hunger in his stomach. He begins to eat, slowly, as he has been taught. No slouching, no elbows, no chewing with an open mouth. The knife must glide cleanly, the fork must be held delicately, and the bread must be broken, not bitten. Every motion is part of a performance that has been rehearsed since childhood. A prince must eat with dignity, must show moderation, must embody temperance. The food itself is often rich, spiced, carefully plated, but taste is not the point. He barely notices it anymore. He chews and swallows with the same blank attentiveness he gives to prayer. Conversation ripples elsewhere along the table, diplomatic murmurs and theological disputes, none of which require his input. He listens without reacting, his face composed, his gaze steady. Laughter, when it happens, is subdued and brief, never coming from him. To appear too merry would be inappropriate. To appear bored would be worse. The silence surrounding him is not empty. It is thick with expectation. Every bite he takes, every pause between sips, every shift of his gaze is observed and perhaps remembered. If he finishes too early, it suggests impatience. Too slowly, and it suggests distraction. If he asks for more, he risks seeming gluttonous. If he leaves food uneaten, someone might interpret it as insult. So he measures each action with care, even when his thoughts are elsewhere. On the stables, the wind in the courtyard, the quiet ache in his legs. He wonders if any of the others are truly hungry, or if they, too, are eating for the sake of appearances. The clergyman at his side blesses the next course. The ambassador 2 seats down comments on the texture of the fish. The prince nods, once politely. He does not speak unless spoken to. And when he does, it is brief, careful, and rehearsed in his mind before the words ever reach his tongue. When the meal ends, it does so with ceremony, not fullness, a final blessing, a wiping of the mouth, a standing on cue. The plates are cleared by silent hands, and the prince exits not as a boy who has eaten, but as a figure who has performed. No one asks if the food pleased him. No one wonders if he would have liked a different dish, a warmer room, a quieter setting. That is not part of the equation. Meals, like every other aspect of his life, are governed by ritual, hierarchy, and restraint. He returns to his chamber without comment, the taste of wine fading from his lips, the stiffness in his back reminding him of how still he had sat. The silence follows him there, not because he is alone, but because he has learned to carry it. He dines as he lives, watched, measured, and wordless, not for joy, for duty. The mirror stands tall and narrow, framed in carved wood darkened by time and smoke. It leans slightly against the stone wall of his chamber, warped just enough to bend the edges of the reflection. Each morning, the prince stands before it, motionless, as others adjust him. A servant combs his hair in measured strokes, flattening any strands that dare stray from their assigned place. Another smooths the folds of his tunic, tightens the belt, lifts the cloak into place so it falls just so. A third attends to the finer details, brushing dust from his shoulder, checking the alignment of the brooch at his collar. None of them speak unless addressed. Their hands move with the speed of habit, their faces blank, and all the while the mirror watches. He looks into it and sees a face he knows too well, or rather, a face he has been taught to accept. Pale, still, composed. The expression is one of calm reserve, a softness around the eyes that suggests wisdom, not weariness. The chin is lifted, but not too much. The mouth relaxed, but never open. It is not his face, it is the face of a prince. He has been trained to wear it, long before he understood why it mattered. He was shown how to hold his jaw, to look thoughtful, how to narrow his gaze just slightly, so it would seem he was always listening, how to smile with only part of the mouth, enough to appear polite, but never foolish. A full grin, he was told, was undignified. A frown, dangerous. His eyebrows must never knit together, not even in pain. His lips must never twitch in annoyance, not even when insulted. The mirror became his rehearsal stage. He studied it more than any book, not out of vanity, but out of necessity. He learned which angles made him seem decisive, which shadows gave him gravitas. He practiced reactions until they were no longer reactions, just fragments of performance stitched into the fabric of each day. Sometimes he blinks and wonders what his face looks like when no one is watching. But he never sees it. Even alone, he wears the mask. The garments reinforce the illusion. Rich fabrics, deep colors, embroidery so intricate it distracts from the slight hunch in his shoulders, the tension in his jaw. Nothing is accidental. The collar is high to elongate the neck, the sleeves tailored to suggest height, the boots polished not for utility, but for presence. Each item he wears pushes him further from himself. There are days when he removes his outer layers and stares into the mirror with bare skin, hoping to find the boy beneath. But even then, the stiffness lingers. His posture does not relax. His expression remains guarded. The eyes that meet his own in the glass are his, but distant. Like seeing a painting you vaguely recall posing for. He reaches up to touch his face sometimes, curious if it will feel different. It never does. Flesh and bone still respond to him, but the image belongs to something else. Something expected. Something constructed. He wonders if others feel the same. If the king, too, watches himself and wonders where he went. If the portraits that line the hallways ever resembled the men they were painted for. The prince is not naive. He understands that image is power, that people believe what they see long before they believe what they hear. But that knowledge doesn't comfort him. It isolates him. Because he knows the truth. The mirror lies. It shows what it must, not what is. It reflects the air, not the human. And so each morning he nods at the reflection, accepting the illusion. He steps away from the glass dressed in silence, carrying the weight of a face not quite his. The doors open, and the world sees the prince they expect. But somewhere behind the polished eyes and quiet mouth, the boy remains, waiting for a moment that may never come, when the mirror will tell the truth, and he will finally recognize what he sees. The quill sits awkwardly between his fingers, too thin to feel steady, too light to feel real. The ink is already prepared, thick, dark, carefully mixed, and the parchment lies waiting, trimmed and pressed to perfection. He is not alone. A clerk hovers behind his left shoulder, silent but unmistakably present. Across the table sits his tutor, posture rigid, eyes fixed on the blank page. The prince is told what kind of letter today's exercise will be. A formal greeting to a neighboring duchy, or a congratulatory note to a noble's newborn heir, or perhaps a message of condolences to a distant relative he has never met. The subject changes, but the purpose remains the same. Every word he writes must sound warm without warmth, dignified without distance, and graceful without giving away anything of himself. He begins with the appropriate title, always dictated, always rehearsed, and proceeds to the first sentence, which is never his own. His penmanship is judged more harshly than his sincerity. The loops must be clean, the spacing exact, the flourishes subtle but present. Any smudge becomes a lesson, any hesitation a correction. He is told which phrases are acceptable, which salutations are customary, which expressions show nobility without sentiment. The tutor speaks slowly, repeating whole lines he is expected to copy verbatim. The prince nods and writes, his eyes tracing the ink even as his mind drifts elsewhere. The words he pens are elegant, practiced, hollow. It is with great joy. We were grieved to learn. Please accept our most sincere. He knows these lines by heart now. They belong to everyone and no one. Each letter is a performance, sent not to connect, but to maintain appearances. He is praised for balance, for tone, for consistency, never for meaning. And so he writes with fingers that move, but a heart that stays still. There are moments, brief, unguarded, when he wonders what he would write if he could. Not on parchment meant for messengers, but on scraps meant for silence. What would he say, and to whom? He imagines a letter without titles, without signatures, without the need for approval. A letter that begins not with "to his grace," but with "I feel." But that kind of letter has no place in the life he has been given. He tried once in secret. Late at night, by candlelight, he wrote a page to no one. He wrote of the weight of mornings, of the ache behind his eyes, of the way silence fills his ears like water. When he finished, he folded the paper carefully, placed it between the pages of a book, and never opened it again. It was not fear that stopped him. It was futility. Where would such a letter go? Who would be allowed to read it? What would it change? And so he continues with the others, the official ones. He writes thank yous to men he has never met. Congratulations to boys born into lives like his own. Tight, quiet, ceremonial. Sometimes he wonders if they write back, or if their scribes do it for them. He seals the letters with wax he does not pour, with a stamp he did not choose, and hands them over to servants who carry them away. He rarely hears of them again. He is told they were well received, that they upheld the family's dignity, that his handwriting has improved. But he does not feel closer to anyone. The letters are not bridges, they are fences. And behind those fences, he remains, composed, polite, and silent. Practiced in the art of correspondence, yet unable to say anything true. Every letter he sends is one he does not mean, and every letter he wishes to send is one he is not allowed to write. The courtyard is wide and dry, lined with stone that cracks in the winter and scorches in the summer. He stands at its center, surrounded by men twice his age, twice his weight, twice as silent. They wear the livery of the house, swords at their sides, dust on their boots. They do not bow anymore, not here. This is a training ground, not a throne room. The prince is handed a wooden baton, smooth and polished, a symbol more than a tool. He has been told what to say, how to stand, where to direct his gaze. His instructor steps back, arms folded, watching. The prince raises his voice, sharp and deliberate, and gives his first command. The men move, not because they must, but because they've been told to obey. Their eyes do not question, but neither do they trust. He speaks again, louder this time, and gestures as he was taught. They follow. But the silence that follows is heavier than before. The lesson continues. He is made to walk among the soldiers, to correct their form, to ask them to repeat tasks they have already completed. He tells one man to hold his shield higher, another to adjust his footing, another to fall back and observe. Each follows his instructions, but not without hesitation. They nod and move, but their eyes glance at the instructor, seeking confirmation. The prince sees it. He pretends not to. He knows they obey the title, not the voice. He does not yet have presence. He only has a script. The men are not cruel. They do not laugh, do not disobey. But they carry out his orders with the same detachment one might show a child mimicking a sermon. He is not their leader, not yet. He is a lesson, an assignment. And still, he must continue. He must learn to speak as if he believes they will follow, even when he knows they hesitate. Later, in the chamber where no one watches, he is told what went wrong. His tone was too soft, his posture too relaxed, his phrasing too uncertain. A true command, they remind him, is not a request. It is a certainty. He nods and accepts the critique, though part of him does not understand. He gave the order. They followed it. Why then does it still feel like failure? He practices again the next day, and the next. Learning when to raise his voice, when to pause, when to look a man in the eyes, and when to look past him. He studies the movements of authority like he once studied scripture. He is told to walk through camp and correct what he sees. But what he sees are tired men, dirt under their nails, cloth worn thin from wear. He says nothing. Later, he is asked why. He says he saw no flaws. The instructor frowns. He has missed the point. There is no place in this training for doubt, or empathy, or silence. He is not meant to understand the men he commands. He is meant to shape them. Yet something in him resists. He imagines what it would be like to speak and be heard, not obeyed, but understood. To say go and know why they go, to say wait and hear the breath they hold in response. But such imaginings are left behind with childhood. He is not being raised to ask. He is being molded to declare. And so, day after day, he repeats the exercises. He lifts his chin, squares his shoulders, delivers his lines. The soldiers march, halt, shift, turn. The dust rises around their feet. And though he stands at the center, holding the baton of command, he cannot shake the feeling that he is still outside of it all. Practicing power without knowing what it means, speaking orders into air that does not yet listen. The hall is draped in black, every surface muted by heavy cloth and ritual. Candles line the aisle in stiff symmetry, flickering without warmth. The air is thick with incense and silence. He stands at the front near the bier, where the body rests beneath folds of embroidered velvet. He does not reach for it. He does not kneel. He stands as he was told, upright, composed, hands clasped just above the waist. Around him, voices whisper prayers in Latin, smooth and impersonal. The bishop speaks, the choir hums, the courtiers shift their weight. And still, he does not move. The chamber feels colder than usual, but he cannot shiver. His fingers ache from holding still. His jaw tightens to keep his breath from shaking. Everyone watches, but no one offers comfort. A prince at a funeral must be a symbol, a future, a pillar. Not a boy who has just lost someone. She was not just his mother. She was the only one who ever touched his face without instruction. The only voice in the castle that ever softened when speaking to him. He remembers how her hand used to rest lightly on his shoulder, not to correct his posture, but to remind him she was there. He remembers her scent, faint lavender and parchment, and the way she never looked away, even when others did. Now her eyes are closed forever, and he cannot look at her too long. Not because it hurts, but because it might show. The tears threaten at the edges, but he has practiced how to keep them back. If they fall, they will not be seen as grief. They will be seen as weakness. The kind of weakness that spreads through a room and lingers long after the candles go out. So he blinks slowly. He breathes evenly. He keeps his face calm, not out of strength, but out of duty. Later, there will be a procession. He will walk behind the casket, flanked by men who do not speak, watched by crowds who expect solemnity but not sorrow. His cloak will drag slightly along the stone. The bells will toll, slow and cold. He will lower his head at the appointed moment, press his lips into a line, and listen as the final rites are said. He will not weep. He will not clutch at the wood. He will not crumble. That, he has been told, would dishonor her. A queen deserves dignity, and so does her son. But he wonders, quietly, if dignity and grief are really enemies. He wonders if she would have wanted him to cry, just once. He cannot ask. He cannot even remember the sound of her voice without risking a break in his composure. So he thinks of other things: the scent of wax, the texture of his gloves, the exact weight of the ring on his finger. Anything to keep his mind from slipping towards sorrow. When the funeral ends and the people begin to disperse, he remains behind for a moment too long. The chamber empties slowly, voices fading into corridors, footsteps swallowed by stone. He stands where the casket once lay, eyes on the cold platform, breath still careful. His heart beats fast, but quietly. He does not know what to feel. Grief is a luxury that cannot live beneath this roof. There will be no time to mourn, no words spoken in private. The next day, his schedule will resume. The lessons, the greetings, the appearances. He will be told how proud she would have been. He will be reminded of his duties. And if the ache stays with him, and it will, he will carry it like a secret, like something too fragile to expose. Because even now, even in loss, he is not allowed to break. He cannot cry at funerals, not because he doesn't want to, but because a prince, above all else, must remain unshaken. The jesters enter the hall with practiced chaos, bells jangling softly, faces painted in colors too bright for a room so dim. Their laughter arrives before the jokes do, bouncing off the stone walls like something untamed, but rehearsed. They tumble, sing, mimic the voices of the court, make faces behind the backs of dignitaries who pretend not to see. And the king, his father, smiles. Sometimes he laughs, a full, low, worn sound that fills the room with something like warmth, or perhaps just memory of it. The prince watches from his place beside the throne, seated slightly lower, slightly behind. His hands rest on his knees. His face is composed. He does not laugh. He has been taught not to. The jesters do not joke for him. Their glances seek out the king. Their gestures are tilted toward age and power. The prince is an observer, not a participant. Even joy is something he must study at a distance. There is a particular rhythm to court entertainment. It begins with deference and then descends into absurdity, only to rise again with some sharp mockery of truth disguised as nonsense. The fools dance in patterns that are familiar to all but still feel strange. They mock the cook, the priest, the steward. Rarely the king, and never the prince. He is untouchable and therefore unreachable. They joke around him, not with him. Occasionally one will glance in his direction, offer a wink or a small bow mid-performance. He responds with a measured nod. Nothing more. Laughter must be earned, but not indulged. He knows his place in the audience is symbolic. He is not here for delight. He is here to be seen witnessing delight. His stillness adds weight to the king's laughter. His composure balances the chaos. Even his silence has purpose. Sometimes he watches them closely, not the performance but the men beneath the paint. He notices how they never truly lose themselves in what they do. Every pratfall is calculated. Every insult is delivered with just enough care to avoid offense. Their freedom is an illusion, protected by bells and sanctioned madness. One jester, older than the rest, has eyes that never smile, even when his mouth does. The prince once heard him coughing behind a curtain after the show, hunched over with a handkerchief dark with blood. No one spoke of it. No one thanked him. He returned the next evening, face painted again, voice as loud as ever. The court needs its laughter. It needs the sound of something other than politics and expectation. But the laughter is not for everyone. Certainly not for the boy seated beside the throne. His role is to remain steady, even as joy dances inches from his feet. He does not remember the last time he laughed without caution. Not a polite chuckle, not a well-timed exhale, but a laugh that bent his shoulders and filled his chest. He wonders if he ever did. Laughter, like play, has been filtered through rules. It must be appropriate, brief, refined. The jesters know this. They adjust their tone accordingly. When the king grows tired, they quiet. When the bishop frowns, they retreat. When the prince is present, they remain careful. Their madness is curated, their folly designed. And he, the prince, remains in the audience, learning what joy looks like, how it moves, how it fades, but never what it feels like. The jesters may wear bright colors and speak bold truths, but even they keep their distance, because laughter, in this place, is not shared. It is performed. It echoes. And then it vanishes. He is not alone, but he is never free of loneliness. Boys his age walk beside him, sit near him at meals, spar with him in the courtyard. Their names are remembered, their families noble, their fathers loyal on paper. They laugh sometimes, tell stories about hounds and hawks, pretend not to notice the guards stationed just outside the archways. But the prince knows better. He has been taught that no gaze is innocent, no word without motive. His tutor once told him, without malice or warning, that the best betrayal comes from a smiling mouth. So he listens carefully when they speak. He watches how they move, how they shift when asked a question twice. He never tells them anything not already known. If they speak too boldly, he files it away. If they flatter too often, he remembers. Not because he wants to, because he must. Every friendship is a lesson in restraint. He tried once when he was younger. A boy from the southern court, quick-witted, fearless, with a crooked tooth and a laugh that sounded like freedom. They trained together, slipped bread from the kitchens together, spoke in whispers after the torches went dim. For a time, it felt like something real. Then came the letter, sealed with wax, found by accident in the boy's cloak. Not addressed to him, but about him. Observations, comments, a record of what he'd said, when he'd hesitated, what he feared. The handwriting was not the boy's. It never needed to be. The prince said nothing. The next day, the boy was sent home, called away for reasons never explained. No one asked if he missed him. No one asked why he suddenly grew quieter. That was the end of it, and the beginning of something else. The understanding that trust was not only foolish, it was dangerous. Now, when new boys are brought to court, he watches them like a man twice his age. He notices who speaks first, who defers too quickly, who mimics his phrases to earn favor. Some try to win him with humor, others with silence. None succeed. If he offers kindness, it is measured. If he shares a laugh, it is brief. If he listens, it is with one ear toward the hallway. He learns their patterns, their moods, their family's alliances, not because he wants allies, but because he cannot afford surprises. A prince, they say, must be surrounded by loyal men. But loyalty, he has learned, is a word men use to dress ambition. Behind every loyal gaze is a father with plans. Behind every friendly gesture is a lineage with debts. And behind every game played in the garden is a question of inheritance. bloodlines, and futures not yet secured. There are moments, of course, when he forgets, when something someone says catches him off guard, and he feels the ghost of laughter or the ache of closeness. It never lasts. One look from a passing advisor, one shift in a voice, and he remembers. His world is built on stone and silence, not warmth. He cannot afford softness. The boy who tells secrets will be the boy who uses them. The one who listens too well will be the one who repeats. So he walks beside his companions, eats with them, trains with them, but never leans too close, never asks too much, never shares what he cannot afford to lose. Every friendship is a thread, and every thread, if pulled, could unravel everything. So he keeps his hands still, his heart quiet, and his thoughts locked behind a face that has learned not to hope. Because in a world where eyes are always watching and silence is always reported, friendship is not a comfort, it is a risk. He is told about marriage long before he understands what it means. Not as a bond, not as affection, not as something chosen, but as a necessity, a duty, a cornerstone of legacy. His tutors speak of alliances. His father speaks of lineage. His advisors speak of bloodlines that must be preserved. The word wife is said with the same tone as treaty, and the notion of love is not part of the equation. He is shown portraits, painted faces of distant girls, none older than him, some younger, all unfamiliar. Their features are described clinically: the curve of the jaw, the brightness of the eye, the purity of name. None of these things speak of voice or thought. No one asks what he wants. No one expects an opinion. The decision, he knows, will be made in a chamber far from his own, by men who trade daughters for power and call it strategy. His feelings are not only irrelevant, they are dangerous. He is trained to receive the idea of marriage without question. He practices how to speak with grace, how to hold his future wife's hand at formal gatherings, how to dance with her once, twice, and then return to his place with a nod. He learns which phrases are proper for a proposal, though the proposal itself is symbolic, already agreed upon before the first word is said. He is told that love may come in time, but it is not required. What matters is unity, stability, offspring. He is reminded that a prince cannot afford to be ruled by desire. That love, in his station, is a luxury few can entertain and fewer can survive. Stories are told of kings who married for feeling and brought ruin, of queens who were chosen poorly and became liabilities. He hears these stories often, usually before banquets, when visiting noble families are present. A girl might sit 3 chairs down, eyes lowered, fingers folded. He does not speak to her. He is not meant to. On quiet days, he wonders what it might be like to choose. To meet someone without a name that carries weight, without the eyes of the court framing every interaction. He imagines walking with someone in the gardens, not as a display, but simply because they want to. He imagines laughter not meant to charm, but to share. These are soft thoughts, quickly pushed aside. He knows better. To dream is to disappoint. To want is to risk. He has seen how his father looks at the queen, not cruelly, not unkindly, but distantly. Their words are careful, their gestures rehearsed. Their marriage is a structure, not a shelter, and he is expected to follow the same design. A name will be chosen, a dowry arranged, a ceremony planned. He will nod, stand, smile, and say what he must. The woman beside him will do the same. They will share a life but not a story. When the day comes, he will be dressed in gold and silence. Trumpets will sound. Crowds will cheer. The chapel will glow with candlelight and cold marble. He will take her hand, whoever she is, and speak the vows that were written for him. He will not know the shape of her dreams, or whether she fears the same darkness he does at night. She will become part of his life not through discovery, but through arrangement. And they will live side by side, bound not by closeness, but by necessity. He will call her wife. She will call him husband. Their children will carry names chosen before they were conceived. And through it all, he will remember the lesson he learned too young. That love is not the purpose of his marriage. The kingdom is. The image is. The future is. And so he learns to marry without love. Because anything else is not for him, it never was. The morning of a holiday begins earlier than any other. Before the first bell rings, servants are already bustling through the halls, laying out garments embroidered with gold thread and arranging combs, oils, and powders on polished tables. The prince is pulled from sleep not by the quiet comfort of a slower day, but by the pressure of perfection. His clothes are more ornate, his hair shaped into ceremonial neatness, his every movement choreographed to match the tone of the day. Today is meant to be joyous, an anniversary of victory, a saint's feast, a royal birthday. But nothing about it feels light. From the moment he opens his eyes, he is on display. Even his breakfast is altered. Smaller portions, more color, eaten quickly in preparation for the events ahead. No quiet moments are allowed, no pauses. Only transitions from one expectation to the next. By mid-morning, the castle is alive with the sound of visitors, diplomats, bishops, minor nobles from surrounding lands. Their footsteps echo with intent. Their eyes follow him, assessing not just his appearance but his presence. He must stand straight during Mass, recite his lines flawlessly during processions, nod with precise solemnity when historical speeches are given. The church bells ring louder today, but instead of lifting his spirit, they press against his temples like a warning. The robes he wears are heavier than usual. The collar itches. The boots, polished to a blinding shine, pinch at the heel. But none of this can be shown. He is not here to be comfortable. He is here to be admired, judged, and remembered. When the crowd claps, he must smile, not too wide, not too faint. He has practiced this smile. It fits his face like a blade in its sheath, silent, dangerous, unseen. The feast that follows is long and bright and hollow. Tables stretch endlessly, covered in dishes too rich to enjoy. He sits near the center, beside his father, surrounded by people who speak in turns, but rarely to him. He is handed goblets, served meat carved tableside, passed plates of sugared fruits and imported cheese. The room buzzes with conversation, but he barely hears it. He must eat, but slowly. Speak, but sparingly. Laugh, but only when others do. Behind him, musicians play songs chosen weeks in advance, and jesters offer polite chaos to fill the spaces between speeches. He watches his father speak, raise a cup, gesture grandly. The prince nods at the right moments, responds when cued, and all the while his shoulders stiffen, his stomach knots, his temples throb from the noise and weight of it all. If this is celebration, it is celebration for others. For him, it is theater. When the day ends, he is more tired than he was at its start. Not the tiredness of labor or study, but the deeper fatigue of being observed, performed, and polished for too many hours in a row. He returns to his chambers not with relief, but with the aching echo of the crowd still in his ears. The clothes are peeled off by servants, the rouge wiped from his cheeks, the rings and pins collected and locked away. No one asks if he enjoyed himself. No one expects that he did. These days are not designed for joy. They are meant to reinforce presence, to display unity, to give the illusion of festivity while extracting every drop of energy he has. He lies down not to rest, but to recover. Holidays, he has learned, are not holidays. They are the loudest reminders that even celebration is another form of duty, another mask to wear, another part to play. The throne itself stands in the great hall, raised on a platform of stone, flanked by crimson banners, polished until it reflects even the smallest flicker of torchlight. He does not sit on it, not yet. He has approached it many times, stood beside it during ceremonies, knelt before it during certain rituals, but never rested his weight on its carved seat. And yet, it follows him. Not in wood or velvet, but in presence. Even when he is far from the hall, even when the doors are closed, even when he is in the garden or in bed or alone in his thoughts, the throne remains. It is not a chair, it is a shadow. He cannot play without it watching. He cannot speak freely because it listens. He cannot dream without it entering. The knowledge that he will one day sit there, or never sit at all, colors every moment of his life with a kind of stillness that no child should have to carry. He has been told, often and without ceremony, that he was born for it. That the blood in his veins has only one purpose, that everything he does must lead toward that seat. When he studies, it is not to learn, but to prepare. When he eats, it is not to grow strong, but to remain worthy. When he stands, it is not just as a boy, but as a symbol of what will come. And yet, the throne does not feel like destiny. It feels like a test. A final room he is being trained to enter without stumbling, without pausing, without failing. There are days when he looks at his reflection and wonders if he is becoming that person. If the mask he wears each day is slowly hardening into the face of a ruler. Other days, he wonders if he ever will. If something will stop him before he gets there. A war, a fever, a quiet decision made in someone else's chamber. Even in play, when his tutors allow a few minutes of relief, the throne lingers. If he laughs too freely, someone reminds him of dignity. If he relaxes his shoulders, someone adjusts his posture. If he chooses a word too carelessly, someone repeats the correct phrasing. There is no space in his world untouched by the weight of that future. He sees it in how people speak to him, carefully, flatteringly, with just enough distance to make their true thoughts unknowable. He hears it in how his name is said, always with a title attached, even in whispers. He feels it in the way his actions are remembered. A smile today will be retold tomorrow. A stumble will become a story. The throne is not just a goal, it is a lens. Everything about him is seen through it. Everything he does is measured by its nearness. At night, in the silence of his room, when the fire has burned low and the castle breathes in its sleep, he sometimes dreams of it. Not as an object, but as a presence. Tall, cold, watching. In some dreams, he sits on it and cannot rise. In others, he reaches for it, only for it to vanish. Once he dreamt it cracked in half beneath him. He woke before he fell. These dreams leave no marks on his skin, but they linger in his chest like stones. He says nothing about them. No one would understand. They would call it nerves or weakness or childish imagination. But he knows the truth. The throne is always in the room. It is there when he is praised. It is there when he is punished. It is there when he wants to wonder who he would be without it. And it will remain there, always, until he takes it, or it is taken from him. They stand at every door, motionless, silent, armored not just in steel, but in discipline. Their faces are mostly hidden beneath helmets or cast in stern stillness. When the prince walks through the corridor, they do not move, do not speak, do not nod. But he feels their eyes on him, always, from the archways, from the stairwells, from the shadowed corners of rooms he thought empty. He has been told that they are there to protect him, to keep danger at bay, to make sure no harm comes to the future of the realm. But he knows better. They are not there for his safety. They are there for the crown's. Their presence is not a shield. It is a leash. Their silence is not respect. It is control. They are not stationed to defend his life, but to monitor how he lives it. He once thought of asking one of them a question, just a small thing, about their armor, or the hilt of a sword, or the names etched into the scabbard he saw glinting in the sun. But he stopped himself. It was not fear that held him back, but something colder. A memory of another moment, a day when he lingered in a hallway too long, speaking quietly with a boy from the stables. Later that night, his tutor asked about the conversation. Word for word, the only ones nearby had been the guards. That was the day he understood. They do not report to him. They report about him. Every step, every hesitation, every poorly chosen glance is a line in a ledger somewhere. Even his silences are observed. Even his absences are counted. When he trains in the courtyard, they are there. When he dines in the great hall, they are posted near the walls, eyes never leaving the dais. When he walks alone in the garden, they are not far behind. He cannot outrun them, not because they would chase him, but because he would not be allowed to reach the gates. He is not a prisoner, but he is not free. Their presence ensures that he does not disappear, does not embarrass, does not rebel. They are the eyes of the court when the courtiers are not watching, the hands of the kingdom when no one else is close. And though they carry blades, he suspects their deadliest weapon is silence, because silence is what they carry back to others. And silence, repeated in the right ears, can become punishment long before a blade is drawn. There are nights when he hears their boots in the halls, the slow, measured pace of men who never sleep deeply. He wonders what they think of him, if they pity him, if they resent him, or if to them he is just another detail in the structure of duty. He cannot ask. They are not companions. They are not mentors. They are fixtures, stone carved into flesh, and he has learned to live with them, to ignore them without forgetting they are there, to speak carefully when they are near, and more carefully when they are not. Their loyalty is not to him. It is to the idea of him, to the role, to the throne. And so they guard not his life, but the shape of it, making sure he follows it, making sure he does not deviate, making sure always that the prince remains the prince and nothing more. The dust in the training yard never quite settles. It clings to his boots, his cuffs, the crease of his collar, no matter how carefully the servants brush them clean. He rides in circles around wooden dummies, the sun sharp in his eyes, the leather reins warm and stiff beneath his fingers. The horse breathes hard, obedient but restless, and the prince adjusts his posture for the fourth time that hour. The instructor shouts from across the field, correcting his grip, reminding him of balance, of poise, of control. His legs ache from the stirrups. His shoulder throbs from the weight of the practice spear, but he says nothing. Pain is expected, endurance rehearsed. He gallops, halts, wheels the horse again, each motion echoing a choreography older than him. War is tradition here, ritual in the form of movement. He trains for battles he may never see. And yet, every hour of sweat and bruises is presented to the world as preparation. Inside the castle, he studies maps under candlelight. He traces rivers with his finger, memorizes the names of passes, hills, and cities he will never visit. He learns to read the language of supply lines and alliances, of troop formations and seasonal delays. His tutor quizzes him on historic victories and their causes, terrain, timing, betrayal. But the more he studies, the more he sees a pattern. Battles, he is told, are rarely won with swords. They are won in chambers, at tables, in the hush of arranged marriages and broken promises. The ink dries before the blood is spilled, and when war comes, it is rarely his to fight. Others will ride, others will bleed. He will sign the orders, perhaps, or deliver the speeches. But the field itself, the chaos, the charge, the clash, will likely never be his. Still, he learns as if it will. Still, he trains as if every missed parry might one day cost lives. The bow is harder than it looks. His fingers blister where the string snaps back, his aim wavering with fatigue. He is corrected again and again, told to breathe slower, to release more gently. When the arrow lands off-center, he frowns, but quietly. When it hits true, he does not smile. Accuracy is not celebration. It is duty. The targets never move. They never shout or charge or die. They just stand there as he draws and looses another arrow into silence. Occasionally, he trains with others, sons of knights, distant cousins, visiting boys meant to be molded into pages or commanders. They cheer when they strike the target. They compete in whispered wagers. He watches them with a detachment he doesn't understand. For them, war is a dream of valor. For him, it is a rumor with a crown. He knows too well that courage is often just decoration, and that the true battles, over borders, over gold, over pride, end in signatures, not swords. At night, after the armor is unbuckled, the maps rolled up, the yard swept clean, he sometimes lies awake and wonders what it would feel like to truly fight, to be pushed to the edge of strength, to choose instinct over ceremony. But even that thought is wrapped in silence. He is not meant to imagine glory. He is meant to embody preparedness. And so he trains, endlessly, his back straight in the saddle, his hands steady on the reins, his eyes fixed on the imaginary enemy. The drills repeat, the lessons echo, the bruises fade and return. The world tells him he must be ready. For what? No one says. Only that he must. And though he may never draw a blade in anger, though his greatest victories may come from silence and ink, he continues. Because to stop would be to admit the truth, that his battles are staged, that his training is a portrait, and that the sword he sharpens may never leave its sheath. The walls of the castle are thicker than a man's reach, built from stone quarried generations ago, sealed with lime and worn smooth by time. And yet they speak. Not in voices meant for him, but in fragments, muffled phrases, names caught mid-breath, tones dipped in urgency. He learns to listen without moving, standing near pillars, beneath staircases, behind doors that never fully close. The whispers come from everywhere. The servants' corridor, the chapel vestibule, the stables when no one thinks they're being overheard. They don't mean for him to hear, but he does. Sometimes it's only a word, a name said with hesitation, a title followed by a curse. Other times it's a full sentence, cut short when footsteps approach. He pretends not to notice, pretends not to care, but he always remembers. Because the castle doesn't just echo, it warns. He first learned the weight of whispers when a cousin disappeared. Not formally, no announcement, no farewell, but slowly, like mist fading from a window. One day she was at supper. The next, her seat was empty, her name unspoken. The servants said nothing. His tutors changed the subject. But in the days that followed, he heard it. Her name behind hands, her laughter remembered in hushed tones. Something about letters, something about defiance, something about being sent away. He asked nothing. He knew better. But after that, he began to listen differently. Not just to what was said aloud, but to what wasn't. To who stepped lightly near doorways, to who lowered their voice when he entered, to who always looked over their shoulder, even when the corridor was empty. Secrets are currency here, and everyone is spending. He hears things he's not meant to know, that a nobleman is falling from favor, that a steward is taking bribes, that one of the guards once served a rival house. He hears about his brothers, one too ambitious, one too soft. He hears his own name, followed by long silences. He knows better than to ask what's meant. Truth in this place is layered like fabric, visible from some angles, concealed from others. He learns to read the tone of a whisper as much as the words. He can tell when fear is genuine, when envy is disguised as concern. He knows that smiles in public often follow warnings in private, that the language of the court is not only what's spoken, but what's implied, avoided, denied. And he knows that even when he hears everything, he still understands nothing completely. Because the heart of the castle lies in what is never said. There are nights when he lies awake and replays the voices in his mind, trying to place them, trying to make sense of the patterns. But they shift, like shadows cast by flickering light. No name feels safe. No loyalty feels solid. Anyone could be the next to vanish, or the next to rise. And he knows one day, if he missteps, it could be his name behind the walls. His life turned into a cautionary tale for someone else to overhear. So he listens, and he learns. Not just the words, but the rhythm of power beneath them. Not because he wants to, because he must. Because in a place where everyone is watching, sometimes the only truth left is what slips through stone. quiet, broken, and unfinished, and yet always enough to know this: he is never alone. Not even when no one is speaking, not even when the halls are still. Because in this castle, silence is just another kind of whisper, and someone is always listening back. In sleep, the world softens, but not for him. The bed may be layered with wool and linen, the shutters drawn tight, the fire dimmed to embers. Yet even beneath all that quiet, he carries weight. His body rests, but something in him does not. The dreams come early, sometimes before he fully drifts off. They are not always clear, not always frightening, but they are always heavy. The crown appears often, not on a pedestal, not in a chamber, but on his head. Sometimes it presses against his temples like iron. Other times it simply exists there, unmoving, unshakable, part of him like a second skull. He moves through dream corridors with it, sits at tables too large for comfort, stands before crowds whose faces blur and shift. The crown never tips, never falls, but it never lets him forget. Even in dreams, he is being watched. There are nights when he dreams of running, across fields, through trees, away from something unnamed. And yet the crown remains. He can feel it, clinking against his hair, weighing down his pace. He never outruns it. He dreams of battles too, but not with sword in hand. He watches from a distance, surrounded by advisors who speak in circles while the crown burns cold above his brow. Sometimes he dreams he is giving a speech and cannot speak. His mouth moves, but no sound escapes. The crown gleams in the torchlight. The crowd waits. His silence stretches like winter, and he wakes before it breaks. Other times, he dreams of kneeling, not in prayer, but in surrender. Knees to stone, arms limp, head bowed beneath a crown too large. He never remembers how those dreams end, only how they feel. Even when the dreams are gentler, visions of gardens, warm evenings, faces from years ago, the crown is there, not always visible but always felt. It might be tucked just out of sight, or resting nearby like a waiting question. In those dreams, he walks slower, speaks softer, hesitates more. Because even there, he knows he is not free. His mind does not offer escape, only rehearsal, only echoes. He wonders if others dream this way, if kings before him carried this same quiet weight into their sleep. If they too woke in the middle of the night with clenched fists and dry throats, unable to explain why. There is no tutor to correct these dreams, no advisor to soften their edge, and so he keeps them to himself. They are his only truth, the only place where the crown is not polished, not displayed, just present. When morning comes, he opens his eyes and feels the ghost of it still there. His head aches sometimes, though no illness is named. His shoulders tense before he sits up. He washes his face slowly, as if removing something unseen. The crown waits in the great hall, silent, ceremonial, untouched. But he knows it was with him all night. He carries it into the day, not on his brow, but behind his eyes, the weight of who he must become, what he must never forget. The crown, they say, is honor, legacy, destiny. But in dreams, it is something else entirely. Not a symbol, not a gift, just weight. And the longer he wears it, even in sleep, the less he knows where he ends and it begins. The first lesson in smiling comes not from joy, but from necessity. The prince is still young when he is told to stand beside his father and receive a delegation from across the sea. He is dressed in his finest, the sun too bright in the hall, the voices around him thick with ceremony. When the foreign lord steps forward, the boy notices the way his father's posture changes, just slightly, like the tightening of a rope. There is a pause, one that almost goes unnoticed. Then the king smiles, slow, measured, practiced. The boy does the same, though he doesn't know why. It is only later, in whispers behind stone walls, that he hears the truth. The man they smiled at once led the men who killed their kin. A border raid, a treaty broken, a retreat turned massacre. But that was years ago, and now he is a guest. The lesson is not explained. It does not need to be. The prince understands. A ruler must smile when it is required, not when it is earned. From that moment on, the smile becomes part of his uniform. Just like the crest on his cloak. Just like the rings he wears during council sessions. A prince must know when to bare his teeth and when to soften his mouth. He is taught to relax his cheeks without letting his eyes shift too quickly. To raise one side of his mouth slightly higher than the other. To mimic warmth without promising it. He practices in mirrors, in empty rooms, before dinners, after prayers. His tutor corrects him gently when the smile is too wide. It shows desperation. Too narrow, it shows disdain. Just enough to seem sincere. Not enough to be believed. He is warned never to let the corners of his mouth move independently from his eyes. People notice. People remember. A smile is a weapon, a shield, a distraction. But never, under any circumstance, a reflection of the heart. There are times when he smiles while speaking to men who insult him indirectly. Older nobles who chuckle at his youth, who compare him to his father, who offer him gifts too fine to be honest. He nods, returns the smile, even thanks them. The guards near the pillars say nothing. The advisors pretend not to hear. But the prince catalogues every word, every smirk, every name. And still he smiles, because that is what diplomacy demands. In court, a grin can seal a treaty more quickly than a signature. In feasts, it can end a feud, or hide one. He learns to smile during toasts that burn his throat, to smile at marriages arranged without his say, to smile when foreign children are brought before him and introduced as future allies. No one asks if the smile is real. No one cares. It is not about sincerity. It is about performance. And he becomes very, very good at it. He knows that one day, if the winds shift, he may be asked to welcome the man who betrayed his family, not as an enemy, but as a friend. He may be asked to host him, to share bread with him, to offer a toast in his honor. And when that moment comes, he will be ready. Not because he forgives, not because he forgets, but because he must. The kingdom demands it. The people expect it. Peace, after all, is paved with masks, and a prince who cannot wear one is a danger to everyone. So he smiles, every day, in every room, to allies, to enemies, to ghosts, and no one sees the difference anymore. Not even him. The expression settles into his face like weather on stone, fixed, familiar, forgotten. And behind it, the boy who once smiled for joy is gone, replaced by someone who smiles because the world leaves him no other choice. They sit at the same table, their elbows nearly touching, their voices measured, their smiles thin. The prince watches his brother slice bread with too much care, listens as he answers questions with too much thought. It is a quiet game, but one that never ends. Every gesture is a message, every silence a calculation. They are close in age, close enough to have once played together without knowing what it meant. But those days are gone. What remains now is formality, courtesy wrapped in suspicion. Their conversations are polite and short, each aware that too much warmth would draw attention, and too little would spark rumor. Behind every word is the echo of a future neither of them can name aloud. Because in this world, a sibling is not just a sibling. A sibling is a shadow with a heartbeat. They are both trained, dressed, presented. Both receive the same tutors, sit in the same chambers, repeat the same prayers. But only one will inherit. And though the line of succession is clear, the future is not. Illness, politics, war, any of these can shift the order like wind through tall grass. Everyone knows it. No one says it. The younger brother smiles when he is praised, bows when guests call him handsome, charming, promising. The prince sees the ambition beneath it. Not hatred, something colder. A kind of readiness. He has heard courtiers whisper about the brother, how he might make a fine leader, how he listens better, how he lacks the prince's stubbornness. They say it as flattery, but it lands like warning. The crown does not always follow the plan. Sometimes it follows the louder footsteps. There are sisters, too, soft-spoken, but no less strategic. Their futures are arranged by others, tied to treaties and marriages. But that does not make them safe. A sister married to power becomes part of its machinery. Her voice can travel where his cannot. Her loyalty is often promised, but not guaranteed. In quiet corridors, their conversations are brief and strange. There is affection, but it is wrapped in performance. Even comfort is weighed, a touch on the arm, a nod across the room, and beneath it, a knowledge that blood does not always mean safety. The family is not a hearth, it is a chessboard. And he is a king not yet crowned, surrounded by pieces that can move in every direction, including against him. He does not hate them. That would be easier. Instead, he carries something heavier, the burden of never being certain. He cannot trust their smiles, but he still remembers their laughter. He cannot confide in them, but he still remembers the nights they whispered stories beneath shared blankets. That memory lingers like warmth from a long-cooled fire. But warmth does not last here. It is replaced by posture, by rank, by roles they were all born into but never chose. And so they live beside one another, share meals, walk halls, nod in public. But love is distant. Jealousy, more familiar. And deep beneath every interaction is the unspoken truth. If something were to happen to him, the line would not end. It would simply shift. And the face beneath the crown would carry a different name, perhaps even one that once called him brother. His hands are always clean. That is the rule. No dirt beneath the nails, no stains on the skin, no calluses to show where labor once lived. He is scrubbed each morning with water warmed over fire and poured into a polished basin. A servant hands him a cloth, and he dabs, not rubs, his fingertips. The skin must remain soft, pale, fit for writing decrees, for raising goblets, for accepting the oaths of others. His hands are not meant for lifting, not for sewing or hammering or dragging anything heavier than a ceremonial sword. even that he holds only during processions. The blade remains clean, too, stainless, just like him. He is told this is proper, that dignity begins with appearance. That command is lost when mud is visible, and so he never touches it. Not the mud, not the work, not the mess of the world below. And yet, he feels the weight of it, not on his palms, but in his thoughts. The filth, the sweat, the things done in quiet corners and dark corridors, all of it swirls near him. He overhears conversations meant to be private. Servants speaking low about the steward stealing grain. Advisors whispering about a cousin who visited too often. Nobles pressing bribes into open hands. These are the stains no cloth can remove. He listens, always quietly, and understands. His world is not clean, even if his hands are. His robes may be brushed smooth, but the fabric rests on rot. The crown may shine, but its edges are sharp with secrets. He is taught to nod, to ignore, to endure. But still he knows. There is dirt in every deal, and he is part of every deal, whether he touches it or not. Sometimes he envies the stable boy, covered in straw, arms thick with muscle, a face smeared with sweat and soil. He works, eats, sleeps. He is not watched every moment. He does not need to bow or smile. He does not need to pretend. The prince once asked to help feed the horses, just once. The request was met with silence, then a polite refusal, then a lesson in lineage. A prince does not serve. He commands. He observes. He delegates. And so he walked away, his hands empty, the air colder than before. He watches others work and feels a strange ache, not of pity, but of absence. He does not know the weight of tools. He has never bled from labor, and still, his life feels heavier than theirs. There is a lie in the way they dress him, a suggestion that he is above mess, above need, but he is not. He carries burdens he cannot name, truths he cannot speak, expectations he cannot escape. His hands may be clean, but they are never free. They are trained to gesture, to rest, to sign papers whose contents he does not yet understand. One day he will touch those documents with full knowledge of their weight, and his hands will still be clean. That is the tragedy. That is the design. He is a figurehead, a symbol, and symbols do not get dirty. But the dirt remains, behind the words, behind the silk, behind the throne. It waits quietly, like a truth no one will say aloud. The applause begins before he enters the room. It always does. Nobles rise, their hands meeting softly, not out of joy or recognition, but out of custom. His name is announced with formality, titles flowing like ribbons. Son of the king, heir apparent, guardian of the realm to come. He walks slowly, the way he has been taught, every step measured. He does not stumble, not because of grace, but because the path is cleared. Every chair positioned, every gaze rehearsed. The praise swells around him like incense, thick, sweet, and choking. They complement his posture, his poise, the shape of his shoulders beneath the royal cloak. They say he is wise beyond his years, though they have never asked what he thinks. They toast his future, though he has not shaped it. And always, they speak of him with words meant not for him, but for those watching. The praise is public, but it never feels personal. He remembers the first time he realized the words were empty. He He had recited a passage of scripture flawlessly during a feast, each word ringing clearly. When he finished, the hall murmured approval. But later that night, his tutor corrected his inflection in private. He had misemphasized the second verse. No one had noticed or cared. The applause had come anyway, not for the accuracy, but for the act. He began to see the pattern. If he rode a horse across the courtyard, the guards would say how strong he looked, though he only held the reins. If he attended a sermon, the priests would praise his devotion, even if he barely listened. Every gesture earned admiration, but none of it felt earned. His presence was enough. His title was the cause. And over time, the difference between his self and his image blurred. When he tries to contribute, to offer an opinion in council, to ask questions about strategy, the room shifts. Advisors smile tightly. Some nod, some ignore. Later, his father speaks to him in private. "It is good that you listen. One day, you will speak." The message is clear. Praise is safe, but participation is not. He is allowed to be impressive, but only in ways that do not disrupt the performance. He learns to hold his tongue, to accept the compliments without reaching for their meaning. When a visiting baron says he will be a great king, the prince does not ask, "Why?" He bows, says thank you, smiles without showing teeth, and wonders what it would feel like to be praised for something real, something chosen. He does not hate the praise, but he begins to fear it. Because with every compliment, the walls around him grow higher, the expectations heavier. They call him noble before he has made a noble choice. They call him wise before he has failed and learned. The path before him is lit not by discovery, but by confirmation. He is told he is strong, kind, clever, whether he is or not. And so he performs, and with each performance, he wonders what remains underneath. What self might exist if the lights went out, if the crowd looked away, if the praise stopped. He does not know, because the praise never stops. It fills the silence where his own thoughts might live. And in that silence, he begins to understand. The crown he will wear is not just heavy with duty, it is hollow with the absence of choice. He wakes, dresses, studies, dines, trains, and listens. Then he does it again and again. The days pass like pages in a book written by someone else, heavy, orderly, and irreversible. No chapter surprises him. No sentence is truly his. He is surrounded by life, yet lives little of it. From the outside, it appears he has everything: silks, tutors, servants, status. But none of it is chosen. None of it can be refused. And so he waits. Not for joy, not for freedom, but for the moment he will become what he was always meant to be: a king, a symbol, a man who leads not from desire, but from obligation. The waiting is not idle, it is scripted. Each hour shaped to prepare him, to polish him, to make him acceptable in the eyes of those who will never know who he is beneath the crown. He does not resist. He endures. That is what princes do. As he grows older, the corridors seem narrower, though their stone does not move. The windows seem higher, though his eyes now meet them. His world does not shrink, but his hope does. When he was young, he wondered if something might change. If a single act, kindness, bravery, defiance, might carve a new path. But those thoughts have dulled, carved down by repetition, by the gentle correction of every impulse. When he hesitates, they guide him. When he questions, they reassure. When he dreams, they remind. The throne awaits, and so he waits too. He does not run because running would mean shame. He does not rebel because rebellion would mean exile. He stays perfectly still in a life that moves around him like a tide he cannot swim against. And every tide brings him closer to the moment when the waiting ends and the burden begins. He wonders sometimes who he might have been. Not often, because wondering hurts. But in rare moments, when a servant laughs freely, when a sparrow lands outside the window, when the fire crackles without purpose, he feels it. The ache of an unlived life, a life where choices were taken not for him, but by him, where a mistake could be his own, and so could the forgiveness. But the ache fades. It must. He cannot afford to carry it. Instead, he fills the silence with readiness, practices speeches he will never write, stands straighter each year, learns how to endure flatteries and betrayals alike. They call it strength, but he knows it is something else. Not weakness, not fear, something quieter. The resignation of someone who no longer hopes for the story to change, only for it to finally arrive. And still, he waits. For the crown, for the death that must come before it, for the weight that will replace the longing. He waits not with excitement, but with a kind of reverent sorrow. He does not want to be king, but he will be. He was made for it, shaped for it, denied every other shape. And so he walks forward without running, speaks without revealing, lives without touching the ground. Not because he is strong, but because he has no other way to move. The waiting is not a pause. It is the life itself. Long, measured, lonely. And one day, when the last breath leaves the old king's lungs, the prince will no longer wait. But he will not be free. He will be crowned, and nothing will be lighter. Thank you for staying with this quiet story. Perhaps now you see, even a life of privilege can be shaped more by duty than by choice. Sleep well, you are not alone.